So, Pokemon is a cool franchise, am I right?
For the past 26 years of video game history, the presence of Pokemon has increased exponentially among the world, thanks to merch, collaborations with musicians and brands, trading card games, the anime series, manga tie-ins, and of course, the very games themselves. Pokemon is known to everyone of all ages, and that's not even scratching the surface. As far as we know, there are currently 900 plus Pokemon and more than 20 games revolving around the franchise, and with waves of a new and refreshing generation for us to tackle later this year by the name of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, things surely are on the uphill for the franchise. But do you ever wonder what it was like back then?
Now, I know that there is a bit of a rough patch with the current games, despite me saying that things are looking good for the Pokemon franchise, which is kind of why I wanted to make this retrospective of sorts of the early games and kind of see what made the series so popular in the first place, and to kind of see how it slowly developed to how it is today, so to speak.
Yeah, we're gonna take a trip back into the past, as I figured with the upcoming Generation 9 games, I wanted to take a moment and appreciate the Pokemon franchise by rewinding things a bit and heading into the very first games here. Figured it would be nice to see the charm and quality that each Pokemon generation presented back then, as well as find an excuse to play Pokemon in general.
Plus, this is sort of an apology, as I did wanted to make a Pokemon Legends Arceus review video for you guys, but that never really happened in the end, and that's mainly because the script for that video was way too long. I had to reformat that, I had to fix some things for it, and ultimately it didn't really feel right to make as a video, but maybe someday we will indeed tackle Pokemon Legends. Someday.
Pokemon Generation 1 was for starters one of the generations that I did not see its inception, mainly because I wasn't even born yet, but I was aware of them thanks to Generation 3's Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green and, Pokemon Let's Go on the Nintendo Switch. There was also the Pokemon anime that I would watch growing up like all kids did back then if it wasn't Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Digimon, but seeing that we are tackling the original games here, this will be something interesting for me to look into both gameplay-wise and development-wise. So while the 90s was mostly an era that was transitioning from 2D pixelated graphics to more 3D polygonal ones on the console settings such as the Nintendo 64 and Sony PlayStation, the Nintendo Game Boy still stayed the same throughout most of its career, mainly due to its hardware limitations, but primarily because it was the better handheld experience at the time. Sorry Sega Game Gear, but we all knew that from the get-go. Because of the Game Boy's success, this meant that many games would be made for the gaming brick during its lifespan. You had Kirby making his debut with Kirby's Dreamland, Samus making a return, Return of Samus, and of course you had your Mario Tennis and your Mario Worlds here and there. However, the Game Boy was also something that Game Freak, the main developers of Pokemon, wanted to get a piece of that action while the iron was striking hot.
By the way, did you know that before it became a game development company, it was originally a game magazine company? Which kind of makes sense by the name of it, Game Freak. They were like freaks for games, and so they covered it in articles in a bunch, but that's very interesting.
Now, this is where the origin of Pokemon truly starts, as after they shift from being a video game magazine company to one that now develops games for a living, Game Freak's founder, Satoshi Tajiri, began to envision the idea of Pokemon to be something a little less than what we know it as today, and something a bit more buggy, if you can catch my drift here. Tajiri was a fan of bug collecting as a kid, and that is what inspired the basis of the Pokemon games. Of course, knowing that not all players would want to play the concept would fall in love with catching bugs, the idea of catching creatures as a concept in general was still set in stone, and a project for the series began as early as 1990 to ensure they knew what they were doing, as back then, Game Freak had very little gaming experience other than a few projects here and there as a means to add funding for their Pokemon project. There was Mendel's Palace, their very first game for the NES, Pulseman for the Sega Genesis and Mega Drive, and they helped in development for other video games under Nintendo until they had enough funding to continue their efforts on Pokemon Red and Pokemon Green. Wait, Pokemon Red and Green? Did I read that right? Let me check real quick.
Huh. Looks like it was. Guess that explains Fire Red and Leaf Green then.
Yeah, we wouldn't see Pokemon Blue and Yellow later on for the West here it seems, but that really doesn't matter as they're all coded the same. Just with Pokemon Yellow, you get a Pikachu behind you at all times throughout your adventure. That yellow prick, get away from me. During the course of its 6-year development, Tajiri also wanted Pokemon to be a bit more like an RPG than anything else. This would allow him to implement the fighting element to the games that would let players compete against each other as they collected the strongest creatures imaginable. But he also did not want them to die in the process either. Essentially, cockfighting, but for children. Whatever that analogy means anyway. This is where the fainting concept emerged, since Tajiri figured that people would be attached to these creatures and would see them as virtual pets like Tamagotchis. Though we're being honest here, it has been stated and shown that Pokemon can canonically die, as we remember the Marowak mother death in Lavender Town, and nowadays people are on the hype train to do a Pokemon Nuzlocke here and there, so I guess we can say that Tajiri's initial image of these creatures does not matter anymore. It was also said in an interview that Tajiri's major inspiration for Pokemon was Square's Final Fantasy Legend, a Final Fantasy game but for the Game Boy. Tajiri felt that the Game Boy was more than just platformers and Tetris, really stressing the need for the RPG genre to be a part of the handheld experience, to which I have to give him credit for saying that, because most RPGs nowadays have come from the handheld setting and made great experiences for many people, The World Ends With You and Digimon Cyber Sleuth being some good examples. In terms of the name of the project though, it was originally going to be Capumon, short for Capsule Monsters, since their intention surrounding Pokemon was to collect these creatures as if they were gacha capsules, which would explain the random encounters, the Pokeball design, and the rarity of each and every Pokemon, especially those that are version exclusive. The name of course fell right for Game Freak for about 10 minutes before scrapping the idea altogether. Yeah, they didn't enjoy the title Kapumon because it didn't feel as trendy and catch grabby, and so back to the drawing board they went until they decided to keep the same concept of capsule capture and just renaming it from Capsule Monsters to Pocket Monsters to fit the aesthetic of having a pocket-sized adventure for the Game Boy. With the concept written down, it was time to refine the work of making the original 151 Pokemon, the region, characters, and the game in its entirety. Because of this, Satoshi Tajiri would enlist the help of two others who are developing Pokemon, Ken Sugimori for the artwork and Juichi Masuda as its head composer. Two masterminds that are still working hard on the franchise today in both categories, with Masuda having mixed reactions simply by mentioning his name, which, oh boy, we will cover that later on. I'd say when we cover Pokemon Generation 5 or Generation 6. I do want to start talking about the soundtrack first because Masuda is one heck of a composer for the Pokemon franchise, even though there are other legends like Go Ichinose, who is most credited in the later generations of Pokemon. But I gotta say, despite the hardware limitations of the Game Boy, there were still bangers that would not only be a great listen, but also iconic and lay the foundation for what a Pokemon game and soundtrack is. Tracks like Pallet Town, Route 1, the Trainer Battle theme, the Gym Leader theme, Rival Encounter, and even the eerie Lavender Town, Kanto has never felt so unique and alive than ever before, and I love that about this soundtrack. Sure, there are now remixed versions of these tracks, but honestly, if you haven't, I still recommend giving the original soundtracks a listen. Trust me, you won't regret it. And Sugimori would then work as head art designer with only a team of 10 people to work on creating the infamous 151 Pokemon, drafting early works of the Pokemon designs before finalizing them to how they are now, both lovable and others not so lovable, to others being straight nightmare fuel. Yeah, I'm talking about you, Gen 1 Ghastly. An interesting sidebar here, but Ken Sugimori wasn't the one who designed the starter Pokemon Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle, as those are actually credited to Atsuko Nishida. She also did the design for Pikachu among many others from this generation and in future generations. It's also strongly implied that Rhydon was the very first Pokemon design conceptualized, which, upon looking back at my footage of playing the originals, you really see these guys poking around from time to time to represent your local Machops, Charizards, and any other Pokemon that wasn't a fairy, bug, or bird in the overworld. Either that or they were really good at using that substitute TM. The Kanto region in Pokemon, now that I mention it, is also something that I want to stress as well. Being named by the Kanto region proper in Japan, there gets to be lots of influence and inspiration being drawn from for Pokemon Generation 1 to use as concept art and final design. It was also the chosen region since Tajiri and the folks at Game Freak grew up in that same very region and wanted the players, mainly the Japanese audience, to feel at home. It is because of this region that we see a lot of the blend between the rural and the modern cityscapes, which surprisingly helped a lot when conceptualizing the Kanto region of Pokemon. As we see in every rendition of Pokemon Red and Blue, there are your naturalistic set pieces like the Viridian Forest, Mount Moon, and Safari Zone, your rural towns like Pallet Town and Lavender Town, and of course the more robust modern cities like Saffron City, Vermilion City, and Celadon City. Ken Sugimori also worked hard to present the many characters, good and bad, for the world of Pokemon, starting with our trainer that was originally named Satoshi and his rival being named Shigeru, which, you guessed it, was named after Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator of Mario and Zelda. It was sort of their way to pay homage to the Nintendo living legend, and that's something that's pretty cool to know. Of course, those were scrapped and Game Freak preferred color coding them with red and green, or as we say in the West here, red and blue. But they were used as a manga tie-in called Pokemon Sensho, which detailed the events of the games in some manner. A read that I have to bookmark for sure, though I'm more of a Pokemon Adventures kind of guy. Alas, these games released on February 26, 1996 to massive success, which I mean, it is pretty obvious given that once again, Pokemon is almost everywhere today. But back then, it was a sight to behold and something that truly carried the Game Boy moving forward.
But enough about the development here, since you guys are all dying to see what I have to say about my experience with Pokemon Generation 1, so let's just get down with the nitty gritty, head on to the adventure that was the Kanto region back when it debuted with Pokemon Generation 1, Red and Blue. Or Red and Green, Yellow and Blue, whatever you prefer. Let's just start the freaking video.
The story begins with the player in Pallet Town, where they're called by the Pokemon professor, Professor Oak, to travel the region and research the Pokemon residing in it. Well, not really called, but more forced, as the minute you walk outside your home, he already snatches you to his white van, I mean his Pokemon lab. He also calls his grandson Blue to help out on his research task and entrusts us with the Pokédex, a digital encyclopedia that when catching a Pokemon, it records everything about the caught Pokemon and all its features. Oak also gives us our very first Pokemon as our travel buddy, and we are on our merry way until Blue decides to stop us in our tracks and have a Pokemon battle on the spot. What a prick. After beating him up or losing depending what you do during the fight, you then set out on your very first Pokemon journey to be the very best like no one ever was. And yeah, that's really about it for Pokemon Generation 1, at least in terms of the main story anyways. The entire premise of this game is to have you catching as many Pokemon as you can and beating up Blue in the process, as he acts as your rival for this game. He shows up almost everywhere, or at least in places where it matters, acting as a mini boss fight to see if you are up for the actual challenge that are the Pokemon Gym Leaders. Yes, for there are 8 Gym Leaders scattered throughout the Kanto region, acting as sort of the RPG boss battles for story progression, as since upon beating them, you obtain a gym badge that makes you eligible for the Pokemon League, the final challenge to truly test your strength as a Pokemon trainer. They also act as sort of the city's mayor due to their strength and prestige, if you will, and each specialize in a Pokemon typing. You have Brock, who specializes in rock types, Misty with water types, Lieutenant Surge with electric types, and so on and so forth, and that is something that, looking back on it now, was an interesting way to tackle the RPG genre. In concept, it feels bare bones if we are talking like full-on Final Fantasy levels of RPG mechanics, but for Pokemon, it adds strategy to the mix, ensuring that you are catching the right Pokemon to get the job done and go about your adventures. For example, need to beat Erica? Get a Fire Flying or a Bug type to do your worst against her. Need help with Koga? Use a Rock Ground or Bug type Pokemon to help out against his Poison type coverage. Don't know how to beat Sabrina, the hardest Pokemon gym leader of that era? Use a Poison or a Bug type Pokemon, and if you're thinking that I said Bug type 3 times was a mistake here, trust me, it's not. Turns out that Bug-type Pokemon in Generation 1 are some of the most OP creatures you will find before they get nerfed in Generation 2 onwards. Like seriously, catch a Weedle and Caterpie in Viridian Forest and you won't regret it. They will break the game in two because of how easily OP they are in this generation, and it also shows a level of favoritism as well. Like I've said, Tajiri really loved bug collecting. Throughout the story, we also encounter Team Rocket, a group of bad guys that might as well be the definition of a mafia group for the Pokemon world. First meeting them stealing fossils in Mount Moon early in the adventure, they stop us on our tracks from time to time due to their villainous schemes. Well, sort of. In reality, we barely encounter them throughout the story, as they're more of a side quest to deal with that is forced onto us while we handle the main quest of researching becoming the Pokemon champion. Occasionally we bump into them, for example in Lavender Town, where they are occupying the Pokemon Tower, and in order to get to them, we still need to enter their secret base in Celadon City to get the Slip Scope that allows us to catch Ghost type Pokemon once we obtain it. It is also here where it's implied we kill Blue's Raticate from when we fought him in the SS Ant, but honestly, don't think too much of it. This is where we meet their leader Giovanni and battle him there, as well as again when they capture Saffron City in order to obtain the Master Ball, a ball that is said to catch any Pokemon with ease due to how unbreakable it is, upon which is given to us as a gift by the president of Slipscope as a thank you for saving his old ass in the process. Way to give the most prized possession to a 10-year-old kid, but I will gladly use it to catch whatever I want now. Going back to Giovanni though, he is the closest thing to an actual threat in terms of all the bosses we meet in later Pokemon games, to kinda skip ahead here for a bit, and it shows in the way Game Freak designed them. Donning a black suit with a large aura on his right chest and looking like he could be a supporting cast for the Godfather, he is later revealed to be the 8th gym leader in Viridian City before he just dips and is never seen again once we beat him. Maybe he just saw the port of the Pokemon Masters EX, or just thought a rebrand from Red to a Rainbow would boost morale. No judgment there, Giovanni. Do what you gotta do to seek that great power to conquer the world. Once you do deal with both Team Rocket's acts of terror and obtaining the Ace Gym badge, you now make your way to the Indigo Plateau, where the Pokemon League is there waiting for you to challenge it. Here you face off the Elite Four, Lorelane being the Ice type user, Bruno for fighting types, Agatha and her Ghost types, and lastly Lance with his barrage of Dragonites waiting to tear you down because of how much damage they can deal and how many they are. This man really loves Dragonites as well as Dragon types as a whole, and honestly I don't blame him. However, as a twist towards the end, it is revealed that we are late to the title of champion, as it turns out that Blue beat us to it first, leading up to one final battle to claim the Pokemon Championship of the Kanto region and being entered into the Hall of Fame's records, forever known as the true Pokemon Champion. Not that little After beating up Blue, Professor Oak shows up later to congratulate us, which is pretty funny because that meant that when his grandson won the title, that man was at home not giving a single crap at all about his grandson. Like, what a jet of a grandfather. Not so sure how he knew we won the title of Pokemon Champion, but I'm glad he's here to tell us how much we've grown as a trainer as we enter our name into the Hall of Fame, thus concluding our Pokemon adventures.
And that's the story of Pokemon Generation 1, a simple plot of two children running around the region, beating up adults left and right, all for the sake of research. And I gotta be honest here, this kind of helped a lot in laying the foundation of what Pokemon is today, both as a world to explore and a game to play no matter the generation.
Because this game is the foundation of the next generations of Pokemon to come, that means that there are some things in its structure and gameplay that feel dated compared to today's standards of Pokemon. For example, I was more than glad to have played this on an emulator than on actual hardware because let me tell you, this game is ridiculously slow. The pacing Pokemon Generation 1 has is close to that of a snail's pace, and with the double speed feature on emulators, it made grinding and moving around a lot easier as there are no running shoes in this game. It's all slow walking and that annoys me, especially since Pokemon games aren't that long to complete. This is also the same game that introduces to the battling and catching mechanics that we're all familiar with in modern Pokemon, but for the sake of this review, I don't mind covering it. Throughout the Kanto region, you also find wild Pokemon in tall grass for you to battle to gain EXP for your already caught Pokemon, or if you want that Pokemon, you can catch it with the Pokeballs you obtain by buying them in the Pokemarts. There are Great Balls and Ultra Balls to use too, each giving higher chances of catching stronger Pokemon should they decide to pop back out for another round or two. Of course, like all Pokemon games, this game introduced the TMs and HMs, short for Technical Machines and Hidden Machines, allowing a Pokemon to use a special move for combat and for traversal in the case of HMs, but at the cost of it being a permanent move that you can't make your Pokemon forget as they level up. And with the slow pacing this game has, oh, it gets slower when you have to constantly pop up the menu to use any single one of these HM moves, be it cut to cut trees in your path, strength to move boulders, and surf to traverse through waters, though I genuinely don't understand why we can't swim. As for my adventure here, I chose Bulbasaur because he can easily beat 3 gym leaders by himself, and because I love his evolutionary lineup, despite Squirtle and Charmander getting more badass designs on theirs. Plus, there's something about Bulbasaur that kinda clicks with me compared to the others that I can't really say why. Next Pokemon into the roster was a Pidgey and a Weedle that would become my powerhouses, and later on a Primeape, Gyarados, and Pikachu that I evolved into a Raichu for additional move coverage and type range. Now, why a Raichu, you may ask?
Raichu's better than Pikachu. Fight me.
To be honest, I did not expect a Weedle of all Pokemon for my team here, but once he evolved into a Beedrill, had Focus Energy and Twin Needle, oh, he became the strongest and easily the most broken Pokemon on my team. An ace that I'll always remember and never forget. But the battling overall is what is most important here, as it utilizes turn-based RPG mechanics that other RPG titles have used for their battle systems around this time. Much like the gym leaders in Team Rocket, we also face off against trainers that just wait there for you to make eye contact for some apparent reason. Like, do they even move from there? Gotta wonder what these guys do while they wait for a kid with a large ass bee with needles for arms to show up. Once you do lay eyes on them, or at the very least just stand in front of them, a battle ensues, and it's like an enemy encounter if we're talking Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest terms, as it is a means to gain EXP and money the more you continue on with your adventure. It is as simple as that, but as someone who started their Pokemon adventures in Generation 4, I did notice a lot of things in this game that made my experience a bit more enjoyable, but also far more annoying than it should be. Moves like Bite and Gust were originally normal type moves, as well as a long list of fighting type moves, which made fighting early encounters in Viridian Forest really annoying, especially if you did not pick a Charmander like I did for your playthrough to deal with the bug catchers. And with a limited array of fighting type Pokemon not having, well, fighting type moves, that made encountering even normal type Pokemon a hassle since the type advantage and movesets weren't fairly balanced. They also didn't have the special defense stat, but rather had it as just special, assuming it handles both special attack and special defense, adds ambiguity, and leaves you wondering if you are tackling the right fight, adding unnecessary difficulty in a game that isn't supposed to be hard in the first place, and sort of an entry RPG for many. Trainer battles in this game are what you would expect if you compare to the newer generations though. You have the youngsters, the lass, hikers, bikers, and so on and so forth, and they don't come down as hard as the gym leaders from time to time. Or at least Koga and Sabrina from Fuchsia Town and Saffron City, because man, those guys were ridiculous, and I will not elaborate further. Poor Bede, my Beedrill for this adventure though, as he sure needed a break from all the coughing and grimer fights he had against bikers and Team Rocket to then be treated to a good can of whoop ass against Koga and Sabrina's gyms. Man was the MVP through and through. Putting the catching and battling elements aside, it is mainly the adventure that I would like to reflect on here, and even though I played Kanto's story through Fire Red and Leaf Green, and you have Let's Go to do that again and then some, the original Pokemon games have this charm to them that I think makes them worth playable in my opinion. Aside from the stat balance and the slow pacing, there is surprisingly not a lot of jank to the formula it started, and if there was, I didn't notice it too much because I was too busy grinding by going back and forth on multiple routes, ensuring that my Pokemon were at the right level to fight the next gym leader or route, because let me tell you, Pokemon Generation 1 was hard, if not the hardest Pokemon generation I have ever played. Level scaling can be against your favor at times, especially with the last 3 gym leaders and Elite 4 as they pack a punch against your Pokemon if you're not careful. Certain moves are not as strong as they are now, and the overall stat balance of each Pokemon felt that over leveling was a necessity rather than a luxury at times. At least that was how I felt towards the endgame portions. However, despite the difficulty, the adventure I had with my Pokemon by my side and using them to fight against Team Rocket, the gym leaders, and my rival is something that I will truly cherish here. And I think that was the main goal with Pokemon here, since the stories, aside from Generation 5 where it mattered, was more secondary as I stressed beforehand. The towns and cities, though small they may be, mainly due to the compact hardware of the Game Boy, still felt like places that they had their own unique atmosphere. Each location you visit had a viable rural town, a busy cityscape, or a port city with a cave next to it. Kanto has a lot to offer with exploration, which time and time again with the remakes gets expanded upon in the best of ways. Overall, Pokemon Generation 1 is a fun adventure, one that I recommend you try out for yourself, regardless if you choose to play the remakes to satisfy that Kanto region itch, because the value this game possesses is still extraordinary and really holds to today's standards, believe it or not. It is something that you will never forget the first time playing, and you will honestly enjoy the adventure more so than the story, and we can all say that for the other Pokemon games out there, believe me. But here in Generation 1, it was a great start to something incredible that has now lasted for 26 years, be it as they may with how we feel with the current generations. This was the region that laid the groundwork for the Pokemon turn-based combat, the lore of the Pokemon world and its inhabitants, the memes, and everything that makes Pokemon what it is today, and you gotta give that region more credit than credit is due. I love the nostalgic feel to the pixels and sprite work, and the games have this difficulty that makes the games fun, challenging, though also overstepping his boundaries sometimes with his tight balance. The fights were fun, the Pokemon I caught during my travels were unique in terms of not using some of them at all from my previous Pokemon adventures, and honestly, it's a game that I think every Pokemon fan should try out at least once in their lifetime to kind of appreciate what they did right and to kind of see what they did wrong that later generations would fix down the line. Of course, that is something I don't want to spoil for you guys, so next time we do talk about Pokemon, we'll be covering Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal, most commonly known as Pokemon Generation 2, as we ventured onwards towards this Pokemon adventure we got going for us here. For now though, it's time for me to head out, so stay safe out there, keep spreading love and kindness to the world, improve yourselves each and every day, and know that I love you guys forever and always to 120, and I can't wait to see you all next time. Remember guys, stay freaking sexy and take care.